Adam and Kate from Enta Solutions. And Adam, give them a wave. Everybody's dying to see you and hearing what you've been up to. I think we mentioned something about a fishing trip last week. We want to hear all about that. But before we start on that, we're going to be talking today about behavior and measuring behavior empirically. But we're going to start with fishing and a fishing trip. Adam, what happened last week? Did you catch any fish?
No, but I got a cool fishing story. Want to hear a fishing story?
This is a cool fishing story.
I mean, I was on crutches, so I was doing like one-legged fishing. But my brother caught a fish after about a day and a half of very little activity. We finally had a good fish on. These are like Chinook salmon, so this one was probably like 20 pounds. And then as soon as we had it on, 2 sea lions pop up about 50 feet from the boat. Their heads just like boop. And like, what happens with sea lions is they get smart and they hang around the boats until you catch fish. And then they steal the fish because they have trouble catching the fish otherwise. So we see sea lions and now we got a fish. And normally when you're fishing a big fish like that, you don't want to like push the issue because it'll pull the hook out or break the line, or you want to kind of like let it tire itself out, let it fight, and then slowly bring it in. But now we got sea lions chasing our fish. So the guy's like, reel, just reel. So my brother's got this fish on, so he starts reeling and he's like just reefing it. He's trying to keep the thing up. This fish is fighting it, so he's just like reeling. And, the guide's screaming, and my dad's there, and I'm kind of hopping on one foot, like trying to see what's going on. And so we're reeling. We get the fish close to the boat, and as soon as they see the boat, like we see it. It's a nice fish. It's like perfect. And then of course it runs away again. So like, he's like, get it reel. Like we're looking for this sea lion. We know he's here somewhere. And then we get the fish back, and it's like right at the boat. He's got the net. And then up comes the sea lion, like right at the side of the boat, grabs the fish, comes out of the water. Like these things are huge when you see them close. It's like shockingly big. And we're all like, whoa, because the sea lion's like right next to the boat, grabs our fish, steals our fish, and kind of like falls back in the water. And they're kind of like puppies. They're cocky. They like throw it in your face. They give you the finger. So he's like kind of got it on his back. He's like, nah. And he like bites it. But he only bites the tail, and he bites the tail off. So now the fish is free, and now blood starts like spewing everywhere. So the guide's like, reel. He's like, so now the sea lion's like there right beside the boat, and the fish is like here. So my brother's like trying to reel. The fish is like kind of moving, and the sea lion is just like in an awkward spot. He's like trying to get at it, and he just like keeps missing it as it goes by his mouth. So he's like swimming and like turning as he's going by the boat, and the fish is still like right on him basically, and he's just like trying to get. And the guide screaming, and there's like blood spurting everywhere because the fish had his tail bitten off. And my brother's freaking out. He's just like, he's like trying to reel it as fast as he can, and it like comes around the back of the boat, and there's like the big motor and the trolling motor, and they're going like into the motor. Like I don't know how this sea lion didn't get chopped up by the motor, but he didn't. So he's still going around, and now his momentum is like on him. So he's like he's trying to stop and like come back. Because the fish, it's still like right here on him. He's just like can't get it. And then the guide like throws the net in between the 2 motors, which is a great way to tangle your net in the motors and lose your net. And like basically pokes the sea lion with it, like grabs the fish and comes back. And now we have the fish stolen from the sea lion. And we have this perplexed sea lion that's just like, what the hell happened? I just like, where's my fish? And we get the fish in the boat, and that's the story. It was crazy. It was like this huge adrenaline rush. I wish I had a video of the whole thing. It'd be amazing, but I don't.
I really want to see you stuff the fish that no longer has a tail, because that is one of the best fish stories ever.
I've got a picture of the fish with no tail. I don't know if I hold my phone up. Well, it might register it. Let's see. But yeah, that's my crazy story. I've never had that ever happen to me.
You cheated nature in a way, right? Like, I mean, I don't know how many times that sea lion has probably cheated the fisherman, right? Nice.
There he is.
Yeah, he's got no tail.
No tail.
So anyway, that's our fishing story.
I love it.
Now, did you eat? You got to eat the fish and chef it up, or what?
Well, they don't allow you to like cook it up that night of like regulations. They're allowed to freeze it and vacuum pack it for it. So now it's in our freezer. We'll eat it. Yeah. So yeah,
Like a barbecue or something.
Exactly. Yeah. So there you go. But while I was there, segue into our conversation today in terms of measuring and culture, because we've all the like it's a fancy lodge, right? Like this is kind of a once in a lifetime trip, and everybody has the same colored gear. They give a rain jacket and overalls to wear, and it's all the same color. So the guests are like basically have a uniform essentially, right? But the guides have varying different gear depending on like what they like or whatever. So some guys have like black gear, a different color. And I was like, this is crazy. Why wouldn't they give all the guys a very distinct, like bright looking gear? So everyone knows these are the guides from this lodge, right? And you're kind of proud of your team, right? It's your uniform. And then I was thinking, because in fishing, tie is if you catch a salmon bigger than 30 pounds, it's a big deal. It's like a tie. They give you a pin. It's like a little ceremony that they do. It's kind of a big thing. So then I thought, like, why not with your guides, either like the number of years they've worked there or the number of tiees for the season, like give them a pin so that they're like proud. So you can see when you have your guide, like this is how many, you're basically providing a KPI of like how many big fish you catch and then displaying it proudly, right? And then there's a little bit of competition that comes out of that and some fun with that. And I thought, what a fun way to promote this like kind of fun culture, promoting your guides and showing them off and having a little side competition. So I thought, anyway, that was my 2 cents. That's what I'd do if I was in charge of the lodge. But,
more flair.
Right? I mean,
exactly. What movie is that? What movie is that where Jennifer Aniston needs to get more flair on her vest? Do you know what movie I'm talking about?
Office Space. Oh, damn. You ever seen Office Space?
No.
It's like, it's amazing. It's a parody of like everything we're trying to do with businesses. And this, is exactly that. And it's hilarious. Just like, it's really good. But that's this idea of measuring stuff and driving behaviors, right? Like, I think that's what we wanted to talk about today. Like, have you ever tried to measure something and then it caused like the totally wrong thing to happen? Like, has that happened to you guys?
Oh yeah.
Right.
I need to get out of this sauna. It's too hot.
Okay. There you go. So,
all right. The ring here.
Perfect. Okay. So what's your
So
story?
how would we set up a measuring apparatus, or the boundary conditions for measuring behavior? Like, I mean, I'm very interested in that. That's I'm all ears on how you guys would set something like that up in a workplace or a.
Well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about some failures. Those are the fun ones. Can we talk about some failures?
Absolutely, yeah. Failure
stories. And I don't want to call out engineering firms specifically, but I will. They often, I won't throw everybody in the same bucket or boat, if you will. They often like to measure something called utilization, which is how many hours are your staff working that can be billed directly to the client. This one drives me nuts. And it is literally like why utilization sucks is I could write an entire blog on why utilization sucks. It sucks employee engagement. It sucks innovation. It sucks client budget. It just sucks everything out of the company. And think about it. If somebody, Dan, is measuring you on how many of your hours are billable back to a client, are you going to be as efficient as you can be?
Absolutely not, right? I mean, you're always thinking about that billable, right?
Oh, yeah. And now, as a manager, I'm told by leadership, we need to up utilization. So I say to you, you're only 30% utilized. You need to have more utilization hours. What are you going to do? Are you in control of going out and getting more clients? What are you in control of as an engineer?
It's kind of like a semi-quasi accountant, billable clerk or something like that, you know?
Right. I'm out. So I don't turn around and go and get them another client and say, now I'm more utilized. Me as the engineer, I'm like, well, I could have done this design in 2 hours, but now I got to take 4.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So like this is, now you're talking about a wrong KPI, and a lot of companies, a lot of firms that track billable hours push on this metric. And so then the clients get pissed off because a design that probably should have only taken them, 50 hours to do, they've got 100 hours charged here. So now it's creating a whole problem with time and material quoting, right? Now clients are going, this is stupid. Why is our budget blown? They don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, and then what have you gotten other than a bunch of bills, right? And that's always resentful from a client. It's just like the bills are coming in, and my assumption would be that you'd have something that would be a KPI on results, like a results-driven approach, right? No?
Mm-hmm. And this is the tricky part, right? Like, let's keep with the utilization KPI, right? Because you're thinking in terms of, spreadsheets like, oh, well, my company makes money if people are utilized up to this point, so that's what I should measure, right? Makes sense. Problem is, when you actually push on it, people are smart, right? Humans are tricky. They're like,
they'll game it to win it.
Exactly. So now you think, oh, they'll work faster and then I'll get more projects or whatever, but they're not. They're going to say, oh, well, I answered a phone call 30 minutes on my timesheet because I need to fill this timesheet. I can't submit it at 80%. I need 95. Well, I can find a 15% in a timesheet somewhere. No problem. I go through, honestly, I would do this as an engineer. I'd fill the whole thing out and it would add up to 31 hours out of 40. And I'd be like, I need 9 more hours. Well, I got this one, I got this one, I got this one. 40. Perfect. Done. Right? And that 9 hours, it's not that I'm lying. It's the stuff that fills the space. It's the answering emails. It's the asking questions. It's going to see that guy, going to see that guy, right? Like, it's not that I'm inefficient. Okay, so now you try that, and you're like, oh man, that's driving people to do the wrong thing. Like, what should I measure now? Like, what I want to do, and exactly what I want is results. Okay, so what can I measure now? Maybe that's different. But before you get there, the second piece, there's a second story behind why this failed, having to do with innovation. So now let's say a really cool idea. I'm going to come to you and be like, hey, what if I saw this new software? If what it does is correct, we could do that same design in half the time, right? And what do you as the owner of the company say? Like, well, it's another software. So you're telling me I have to pay for another software and I'm going to make half as much money off my existing clients? I don't want to do that. Right? But long term.
This actually happened. Okay. Right. So we put together a proposal to a client that said, look, you are doing this task manually right now. If you implemented a software, not only do you minimize risk of error, you're going to have all these efficiencies, you actually save this much time. Like, your people could then take that time and add value. They're not just doing menial input tasks, data management. They could actually add value to the project or to the team or to whatever, right? And the VP turned around and said, but I bill per hour. Why would I want to be more efficient? Like, it took another 2 years and for the client to say, you're too archaic and you're spending too much money doing these tasks, you need to implement this software before they moved. So now you have a client who's like ready to pretty much leave, right? This happened. Like, it's crazy. And I couldn't, how do I argue that? That you need to foresee what your clients want and be better when the mentality is profitability, utilization.
And,
it's frustrating.
To your question, Dan, like to your point, so now you've got short-term gains versus long-term benefits, right? So now we're in this like dangerous zone of measuring stuff, right? So what are the short-term gains and long-term benefits? We say the same trickiness happen in different departments of an organization, right? Like if you have a business unit that does, I don't know, whatever, appliances, and then another one that does different appliances or whatever. And then the people in charge of those, the vice presidents, are rated on their own productivity or their own profits, right? Separate from each other. But what if there's an opportunity where I'm like, oh, I could drive business to that guy and benefit the company? Would I do it? No, because he's going to beat me and we're all in competition for the same job, right? So this is why it's so hard. And there is no like perfect formula for this. You kind of got to try stuff and see how it fails, and then like think about when we go into this and think about it, we're like, okay, small term benefits, long gains, and what behavior do we actually want people to do? So in the utilization, would be like, okay, we want our engineers to be more efficient so that they have a little bit of time left over to come up with good ideas to help improve things, or maybe they help with business. I don't know. What can we do here, right? Like, what could we measure? I don't know. Does anything like to mind? You mentioned like results. Like,
well, I got two analogies. I want to throw one, which is a doctor office analogy, and then another one is a mechanics analogy, right? And so they're both outside of our day-to-day realm, right? So let's start with mechanics analogy. So the thing is that if there's a fairly prescriptive sort of service, a prescriptive sort of services that the mechanics offer, right? And I'm talking like it could be a major, mechanics division of like a Ford or a GM or like a major dealership. It's not necessarily the standalone entrepreneur that's opened up a mechanic shop, right? But there's a standard time allocated for an oil change. There's a standard time allocated for, whatever it is. Now, you can have a dimension of utilization that said, when we first started, doing oil changes, they would take an hour and a half. Now, if the company can internally do an oil change through automation in 15 minutes, basically they walk over and push the button, and all of a sudden, the robot comes out and does it all, right? I'm reaching here a little bit, but regardless, that improvement of a process is something that's, valuable to the choices. Is it valuable to the company, and do you pass that value on to the client? So the thing would be to say to the engineers or the mechanics in this case, all right, you've been able to do that. Now what can you do with that remaining time with every single oil change, right? If you're going to manage it that way. So that's one example, is that you have predetermined times for those services, right? The other example takes it to a doctor's office, okay? And, doctors have to be really cognizant of this too, right? They have independent practices, and their billables, at least in Canada, have a lot to do with what they bill the province, right? For basically, you have a broken leg, or you have a procedure, you have a checkup, or whatever they are. They're all kind of billable, right? So they have fixed, procedure billable. So if the more people that they bring in, and if it takes 10 minutes, it takes 10 minutes. But if they can get 100 people in, in an hour, well, then great. They just make more money because, their paycheck is actually limited by who's paying the bill, which would be the province. Now, what kind of holistic medicine would be better for the public? Well, I remember, for example, when I was younger, my mom used to say that she would go into a doctor's office, and the reason why she kept going back to that doctor is that she didn't feel rushed out the door. You know, she felt that you would go in, you would talk, you would spend some time, and, you know, if there was some of that wasn't, you know, directly related to the specific condition why she was there, there's like extenuating circumstances, there's things that, you know, could inform, you know, that doctor's approach, or actually provide some insight into what the, you know, the condition or what the situation was from the patient. And so do you plan in, you know, more personalized time, right? That might be something to say, what as an organization makes us a really phenomenal engineering firm? Well, we've got the processes in place to do that hour and a half sort of billable hour in 20 minutes. And we encourage them to be customer focused and spend some time, right? So build up a bank of hours and maybe go for a beer with the guys or something, or, you know, develop a relationship with them or something. I don't know. That's kind of where my mind was going with it.
No, and I love that. And that would be a perfect example of like some creative thinking, right? When you talk about leadership or someone who's, you know, driving this culture, right? Be like, yeah, sweet. We cut the time in half. We were able to do this. With more value, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, what else can we do for them? What other amazing things could we throw in there so that we're the best in that so that we can align the short term and the long term, you know? But you know, sometimes it takes the leap. Right?
And here's the other thing it does. So my sister-in-law had this exact situation come up. And so she's the head of one of her departments, and they said, okay, there's this new regulation coming down. We need you to understand it. We need you to build out the processes such that, you know, we are ready to go. As soon as the regulations in place, we can help our clients. Okay, so there's a ton of research. Then you have to like build the processes and build here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to include it into our designs. And here's how we're going to communicate to it. All non-billable work. Critical to the business, critical to the success, you know, but she actually got pulled in and to a meeting with her boss, and her boss is like, your utilization's crazy. She's like, okay, what on this list do you want me to not work on? But it left a bad taste in her mouth. It was frustrating to her. Like, she was working her butt off trying to get this in place before the regulation came out. Right. And then she had to spend an hour justifying it after they asked her to do it. Right. Like, we're talking about, it drives so many wrong behaviors, not just to the client, but to internal to your own staff. Right. Like, you asked me to do something non-billable. I don't want to really do this. I'm going to half-ass it. I'm going to do it quick. And I'm not going to go the extra mile because it's going to actually hurt me. And you're going to turn around and penalize me for it anyway. Right. And so then it really stagnates a business in general, because those are the innovations outside of the billable work that make it a better business, right? And so, like, it's not just a matter of for the clients, it's for your own business itself. You're not going to be leading edge. You're not going to be able to offer a new service to your client. You're not going to be able to grow if you don't allow your people to contribute to this, right?
I got an example.
Ooh, okay.
And you guys will hear this term, and I think it'll resonate. I think it'll pop in a few ideas. So I was, working my whole adult career. I've been working as a consultant, and, you know, now spending a lot of time with the publishing entity. But there was an engineered product. It's an architectural product that I was involved with for many years. And they had a really, really unique feature. It's a differentiator. It's a game changer in terms of what they offer versus all of the competition, right? So this is kind of reminds me of the difference between the bean counters running the business, this kind of idea of the accountants making the decisions, and trying to put logic in the following sort of scenario. So you have a product where you have something that took a lot of engineering to design and develop. It's very unique, and it's something that differentiates you in the marketplace. Now, in terms of cost structure to sell the product, I had said to them that they should put that product at a cost basis or even subsidize it. Now, I got very, very, very little buy-in, but my logic, it didn't go through, because they basically said, as we start to sell more of them, we get, and here's the word, economies of scale, so that the cost eventually will run down. But the thing is, it's that chicken or egg thing. You won't get the economies of scale until you get the sales volume. And they weren't getting the sales volume because the price was artificially high. The price was artificially high because it was highly engineered. It differentiated them from other people in their industry. So my point was, because I was customer facing, right, is to say, subsidize the heck out of that, because no one else has that. It's in your best interest to have as many of those out there, right, as possible, so that more people will be attracted to this really, really high-end feature that every competitor will just pull their hair out to try and mimic, or they'll fail, because this was incredibly difficult to overcome, right? And they did overcome it, and this is what separated them. So try and explain that to somebody who says, well, no, every structure that we have, every product that we have, every add-on that we have has to have its own little microcosm of profitability, or we don't move forward with it.
Those are companies that don't understand lost leaders.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, we're getting into a whole nother topic on lost leaders there, but that's super important to be able to say, okay, we're going to lose a little here because we're going to gain so much more over here. If we give this to our clients, right, in the price or as a free value or whatever, if we give it away, even if it costs us money a little bit, that's okay. We're going to make it up over here. Right. And that's a scary thing for companies to do. But I agree with you. It's the right decision.
So this is a great example where in some case, right, you have a profitability score or whatever that you came up with, and you're measuring that, and that's awesome. Now you have a case where you put in a bunch of R&D, and that's going to affect your profitability score. So the price has to be this high to offset that, blah, blah, blah. But in this case, you're saying, actually, this metric shouldn't apply for these reasons, right? We need to change the game a little bit, where this idea where metrics are set in stone by accountants, and then no one's allowed to move them or whatever, causes problems like these, where the best strategic decisions aren't made. So you kind of need this malleableness, and you have to be comfortable with that. It's uncomfortable to say, like, okay, in this one, we're going to measure number of sales or just straight sales. We're not going to measure a profitability score or whatever, right? And sometimes it's imperfect. Sometimes you can't get it with one. Sometimes you gotta measure like two things that balance each other out, right? Like utilization, right? Excuse me. Yeah, sure. That's important. Someone's got to do an analysis on that, right? And I'm gonna be, as a manager, I'm gonna be like, Dan, you're only 60% utilized. Like, talk to me about that. And you're gonna say, oh, I'm working on this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, awesome. I'm amazed you're pulling off 60%, right? But you're driving the behavior that you were justifying the other 40, right? It's not like you're rolling in and, watching soccer all day. So, the message or the behavior that you're driving is like, it's fine if you're working on improvement stuff. We love that. You just have to be able to show something for it, right? Or
well,
whatever.
And that goes to show you that you should probably be measuring that as well, so that they say your utilization 60, but we see that have accomplished 10 innovation projects you're still in the green because these two together are in the green. Like, what is good, right? So like, then you're driving both behaviors. Yeah, okay. If you're not doing something, you're doing the other thing. Here, so I want to talk to you. I got a story about this exact thing. In that Adam's talking about metrics being malleable and being such that they're driving the right behaviors, but you got to be willing to change up the game. Because as a company matures and as culture shifts, you got to drive different things. You got to measure different things. So, for example, a company has a quality program, and I've seen this, been there, done that multiple times for companies. They're very new. They've never had a quality management system before. They've never measured anything to do with quality. And all of a sudden you say, we want you to report non-conformances or issues. And maybe before that, they've had a very negative culture where you report, you get in trouble, right? Shoot the messenger. Okay. Now you want to implement a quality management system, and you're going to tell people, you want me to highlight where I've made mistakes? Right? Adam, I think, was one of the first people I've ever met who called me up when I was the quality lead and said, I need an NCR, please. I messed up. The only person I've ever seen in my entire career do that was Adam Colazetti. Hence why I was like, we're starting a business. So how do you drive that behavior? Well, you say, we want to measure the number of NCRs reported, and the more, the better. People are like, what? The more NCRs, the better? Yep. We just want you to tell us about them. We're going to give you kudos the more you tell us about them. But once the process is working and you're fixing stuff, right, and people get comfortable and the culture's now there that people are, okay, I'm not going to be penalized. We're in the improvement mentality now. Now we want to reduce how many NCRs we have over total. Okay. I don't want you to stop reporting them. I want us to be now preventative action focused. I'm going to actually measure the opposite. I'm going to measure the decline in them now that the culture's there. So you see now this same measurement has a different perspective because the culture has changed, because the company has matured. And so a measurement that might be right now won't necessarily be right later. And so the way you measure things do have to change. They have to change with your mindset, with your strategy, and with your culture and maturity of your company. So this is where we kind of try to, like Adam said, oh, box checked. We've come up with our metrics and they never get revisited. You're going to fail.
Yeah.
I've got
That's a really good example, Kate. I like that one. Yeah.
It's cool. Hey, like human behavior en masse is tricky and finicky, and you're trying to influence it, but it could be like a water balloon. You squeeze here and it pops up here, right? It's hard to predict, right? A good example, performance reviews. Companies often track completed performance reviews as a metric so that you did them, check, right? How many out of 100% did you do? But that drives the behavior of, oh shit, let's hurry up and get these done. Whereas what if you tracked employee satisfaction? Like it could be one question, 5 stars. How many stars do you give your employee discussion or your relationship with your boss? 1 to 5. If you measure that, now what happens? Right? The performance review attendance, it kind of falls out indirectly.
Right.
But it's slightly harder to measure because now I've got to ask a question, So there is this balance between like what can you measure, what's worth measuring, because sometimes measuring stuff is a lot of work, and you might say that would work, but it's way too much effort to actually do that. So we've got to figure out what actually is practical here, right?
Well, I've got two things or two thoughts here. So one has to do with a win-win situation, and I think it's somewhat related to game theory, but we'll explore that here in a second. And then the other idea was how could we measure what we're doing here? The three of us, right? That would be interesting in a live environment, figure out, okay, how can we measure what we're doing and what metrics and how are we going to do it and what, so I'll get you all primed to start thinking about that. Now back to the win-win situation. There's an evolutionary biologist that I listen to on a regular basis. It's the Dark Horse podcast with Brett Weinstein and Heather Hang. And they've got a really successful podcast. And I've known about this particular example for a while, and I use it with my children in many cases. So and you'll get it. It's very intuitive. So if I have a cake or like a dessert, right, and you've got two kids, and you tell them that they need to share the cake, well, you give one kid the knife, and they cut the cake, and the other kid gets to pick the cake.
Yeah.
Okay.
I cut, you choose. That's how we did it in our family.
Yeah. Right.
100%.
And it's just like, there's no room for cheating in there. Like it's a win-win 100% of the time. Right. And it brings this like, or you'll notice that if they do it and they make it lopsided, then it also is win-win. Right? I've done that. I'd be like, I make a small one, and I'm like, actually, I hope I get the small one because I want you to have the bigger one. And then you get the big one. No, I don't want the bigger one. I cut that for you. No, you stop. You have it. Right? It's like, it's like the two Canadians cutting the cake. It's, like, no, you do it. No, you take it. No, you take it. No, you take it.
Oh, now I want cake.
Yeah. Right. Oh man.
So the goal, I remember one of the things was to say, how do you make more systems like that? Right? It's so simple, but how do you make more systems where they're just like so simply win-win immediately? Like right from, they'd be probably hard to come up with, but.
Right. And this is, Adam kind of touched on this a little bit. And he was talking about like, okay, if you're measuring things at the individual department level, but not at the whole level, then you have this exact problem, right? Like then it's I cut, I choose, right? I'm in it for me. And you see a lot of bigger companies that get very siloed, right? Because it's like, all right, you're in charge of this department, you're the production department, and come up with your metrics and report up to it, right? So I'm in the production department, I'm going to produce. And this guy over here who's worried about how much scrap we're, losing, I'm reporting on how much scrap. Well, this guy, I can't control him because he's just all about production, right? This guy's all worried about all the scrap material that is being wasted. He's supposed to reduce that, but he can't because this guy's just worried about production, right? You're not coming up to a single point and saying, we are looking how we can work together to achieve this. And we're all responsible for that. If you don't tie it to that higher vision, that higher point, you're exactly going to do that. People are going to cut their cake in the piece, right? Because it's not tied to anybody else. And that's why, like, systems are people. You could don't worry about procedures and tools. If you don't have the right mindset of people, you're not going to ever win, or win as big as you can. You might win, right? But you'll never get as great as you possibly can. And it comes back to, what are you as a team trying to achieve? And that's often a huge gap, right? We see people who are like missing the bigger picture often.
Adam, what do you think about this cutting the cake and, equality of outcome by design, by logic, right? What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, well, it makes me think of, there's that prisoner's dilemma. If you heard of this, you probably heard of this.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You've got two prisoners. You're like, Kaylin and I get caught doing something. You stick us in separate rooms and you say, okay, here's the deal, right? If you first one to fess up, essentially gets out of here. But if you don't fess up,
1 to 3 years.
I get hazy on the details. But overall, if you pencil out all the options, it's actually better for you to say nothing, for both people to say nothing overall. The probability of getting out is better. However, you're very tempted to just, oh, okay, well, I'll squeal on Caitlin then, and I'll be better for myself. Whereas the outcome of the whole is that nobody says anything. Anyway, someone else can do a way better job of explaining.
Adam, would you tap me?
I think the message at the end of this is like someone could say to us, be like, hey, can you guys like just, make a cheat sheet on all the KPIs that work for business and just like give that to people. And they're like, oh, these are the ones, and we'll measure these and our business will work. I'm like, no, until it's too complicated. Like Caitlin said, how mature are you? What are your people doing? What's your culture? What's going on? Like, I'm not disagreeing that you shouldn't take an accountant textbook and say, hey, these are the indicators that your business is healthy, right? Financially speaking, right? Absolutely. Measure that stuff, get a snapshot of how your business is doing, and then, use that to make decisions. But what I'm saying is there's like another layer that's very culturally sensitive versus very personality sensitive. That's malleable. That's risk, right? I wrote that blog on risk and said, holy smokes, there's a huge risk to our business if we don't do this. So I should measure that we do that because, social media, I want people sharing and promoting your stuff. I'm going to measure that stuff, right? Because I want to drive that behavior, whatever. You're saying there's like an underlying moving piece that you gotta really try and stay in to watch what happened, and then like tweak this one and then this one and then remove that one and then add a different one, right?
So I'm going to add to that. While you couldn't create a checklist of this is what you should measure, you can create a process of developing, monitoring, and improving metrics. And that can be implemented. And that could be like, here you go. Do this, and you'll always have good metrics. That's where you got to take it back to. Develop a process on how you implement, review, and improve your metrics. Yeah. That's a win.
That's a win-win, right? So, okay, well, I think that kind of brings us to the end of this episode, and I want to leave everybody with one final thought, that the use of the cake analogy can be used as a metaphor for your business. And something to ponder about the cake is that the food really does matter, because when you cut the cake, if you change the cake to cheese, it's awfully stinky, and you know what? You just got to deal with it. So on that note, guys, stay epic, stay awesome, and as always,
thanks, Dan.
You bet.
Bye.